So one of the best kind of sites to document this change from hunting and gathering to a agricultural lifestyle is at a site in Greece called Frankthi Cave. It has a long habitation period from 22,000 to 6,500 BP. So in the Mesolithic, we see its initial occupation, and we see hunters and gatherers. So we see mostly wild cattle with no evidence of intensive plant use at all. We see, though, during this time frame, exotic goods coming in. So we see obsidian show up around 12,000 years ago, and that's from a place called Melos, which is about 100 kilometers away. We start to see around 14,000 years ago a lot of small mammals. We see fish and shellfish, so telling us that they're starting to use marine resources. We see a lot of wild cereals, legumes, and nuts. Around 11,000 years ago, we start to see the resource base change a little bit, where we see sea fish like tuna included. We see pistachio, almonds, pears, wild oats. So again, we're seeing what we call a widening diet breadth, or more foods being included into the diet. So what we do see at the same time, though, with the increase in marine resources, we see a decrease in plant use. Now, the Neolithic here starts around 9,000 BP, and that's when we start to find the first domesticated plants in the cave. And what's interesting is that this domestication and this agricultural lifestyle, basically the entire lifestyle, is imported in kind of a do-it-yourself kit, you could almost think of. So it comes in as a full industry. So we don't see a transition from, say, wild cow to domesticated cattle. We see domesticated cattle show up, boom. We see domesticated goats, boom. Domesticated sheep, same thing. And wheat and barley and lentil. And they also import pottery, again, important because it allows people to store the foods that they're creating or growing. So again, right around 9,000, we see a massive switch to these domesticated foodstuffs. Some of the things that start to happen in the burials, particularly towards the end of the period, is they become quite more lavish. So if we look at the site called Varna, which is in Bulgaria near the Black Sea, we see some have quite lavish goods. So if you look here, you'll see a lot of gold ornamentation, some gold tools, gold beads, jewelry, other kinds of things. So some of the burials have a lot of goods. So you can see that in this particular burial here, you can see different kinds of tools up here. You can see some objects down here as well. So we're starting to see some differentiation in burials. So this tells us that there is changing social norms going on. We're starting to see statuses, and some people have higher status than others. So it's pretty interesting what's going on during this time frame. And it's kind of interesting that it occurs right about the same time people start adopting an agricultural lifestyle. So at Varna, what's kind of interesting is there are 56 really super lavish burials, lots of burial goods put in them, but they don't have any human remains, and these are called cenotaphs. So a cenotaph is simply an empty grave. It doesn't have any human remains in it. What we do find in these particular burials are clay masks that are of life-sized human faces, and some of the masks have a gold inlay for the teeth. We see marble cups, copper needles. There was one burial of an individual. I'm sorry, this should have been talked about earlier, so we'll skip that. It's just mentioning the lavish artifacts. But the big question is, why would people go to such trouble for an empty grave? Some people have suggested, again, this is on the Black Sea, that the empty graves, the cenotaphs, were actually for people who were lost at sea. and so they could kind of be considered shrines to the individuals who were lost at sea. It also might have been a way for leaders to show their power. Look, here's all of this really cool gold and copper stuff that we're making, and I'm so rich that I can afford to put it in the ground where nobody has access to it. So that could perhaps be one of the things, or one of the possible explanations. One of the kind of definitive cultures that's defined for the Neolithic period is linear band ceramic. And I know we've talked in class about how uncreative archaeologists can be when naming stuff, and this is a really good indication. Linear band ceramic, it simply means that there are linear bands on ceramics. That is pretty much the description. So the linear band ceramic, or LBK, originated in the Danube region in modern-day Hungary, and it spread over Central and Western Europe between 7500 and 5700 BP. And farming was spread with the linear band ceramic culture. Now, they weren't clearing land, they were actually utilizing natural clearings in the forest and growing such things as emmer and einkorn wheat, peas, flax, poppy. They were also utilizing domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats. Some of the things that we see associated with the linear band ceramic are timber longhouses, and these are fairly substantial longhouses. They range from anywhere to 10 to 30 meters long and 6 to 7 meters wide, and they're usually grouped in 2s to 3s and found in areas that would have been good for farming. We often find pits inside the walls and in areas between longhouses, so that's some indication that there's some concepts of private property, but also things are being shared among the groups of people. We see pits of raw material in these shared workspaces, and probably all working to integrate the community. We also see some wooden wells, which you can see up here in this graphic. The oldest is dated to just around 7100 BP, and we believe these were for water storage for both people and animals. With burials, we are seeing lots of different kinds of rites associated. So we find cemeteries with full inhumations, we find cemeteries with cremations. What is interesting is that most everybody's head faces east towards the Black Sea and are oriented the same as the longhouses. So suggesting that, again, the sea is still pretty important, but the longhouse orientation also suggests that there's some importance there, again, for the community at large. There is some suggestion that there's some ritualistic cannibalism going on, but that's not all that uncommon in prehistory. We do see more children represented in burials, but not necessarily in cemeteries, and we start to see more women. So it's possible that more women are dying in childbirth, suggests to us that they're getting pregnant more often, because children also have a high death rate. And it could be associated with the ritual cannibalism, and perhaps the women and children are eating undercooked meat in the preparation of the food. The grave goods that are included in the burials do suggest social differences are starting to play out, primarily along the lines of age and gender. So with men, we find a lot of adzes and arrowheads, and with women, we see pots and small tools. Older men tend to have the most goods. So again, we're starting to see some differentiation of status show up in the burials. We also see, again, more indications of conflict. So at Talheim in Germany, it's basically a death pit, and there are around 30 individuals, men, women, and children, in a mass burial, and all show trauma to the head and no other injuries. So it's possible that we're seeing conflict for land. It could be raids by hunters and gatherers who are not happy with their lands being taken over by agriculturalists. Again, we're not really sure just at this point.